We find ourselves at an extraordinary juncture in the Ukraine conflict, one defined not just by the battles on the ground, but by the shifting tectonic plates of global diplomacy. With Donald Trump in the White House now, the Kremlin is watching events unfold with a mixture of hope, anxiety, and strategic caution. And as Trump's ambiguous comments on Ukraine pile up, suggesting that Kyiv may be Russian someday, or dangling a 500 billion rare earth minerals deal, the question for Vladimir Putin is whether his long game is about to play off or whether the entire edifice of his war strategy is at risk of collapse. Trump has long teased the idea that he could end the war in 24 hours, later revising it to a more realistic 100-day timeframe, but his latest pronouncements hint at something more unsettling, an American transactionalism that reduces Ukraine's sovereignty to a bartering chip in a global bazaar. His suggestion that Kyiv has essentially agreed to a vast mineral deal in exchange for aid raises profound questions about Ukraine's agency in any forthcoming settlement. For Putin, Trump's unpredictability is both an opportunity and a liability. The former president's reluctance to back Kyiv unconditionally and his past deference to Russian strategic interests suggests that a shift in US policy could create a path towards Russian-imposed settlement. But therein lies the problem. Moscow doesn't control Trump. He may well demand too high a price for any peace deal, or worse, leave Putin in an awkward diplomatic limbo by failing to implement a coherent strategy of any form at all. Putin has until now played a long game in Ukraine, seizing as much territory as possible ahead of any peace negotiations. But Trump's potential involvement, his threatened involvement, has complicated this calculus. The Kremlin now faces a critical dilemma. It can press on militarily, continue the war of attrition, targeting Ukraine's infrastructure as it did last night, as it does every night, striking gas facilities to bid in a bid to weaken morale, striking civilian infrastructure. This strategy assumes that Western support will crumble under Trump, leaving Ukraine vulnerable to Russian advances of whatever form. Or it can seek an early peace. If Moscow truly believes Trump will be an unreliable partner, it may try to extract the best possible deal from the situation that it possibly can before things go even further against Putin's plans. And recent Russian statements indicate that the Kremlin still insists on maximalist demands. Ukraine's withdrawal from NATO aspirations, recognition of Russia's territorial claims, these are unlikely to be acceptable by Kyiv, but they serve as a marker for what Moscow considers non-negotiable. Trump's transactional rhetoric doesn't necessarily mean he will push Kyiv into submission, especially if European allies resist, but it certainly adds an already volatile, it adds to an already volatile situation. If there's one area where Putin can take comfort, it's in the potential for Western divisions. Trump's comments have already sent alarm bells ringing in European capitals, and Poland has activated its air defences following Russian strikes, and European leaders are acutely aware that if US support for Ukraine wavers, the burden of resisting Russian aggression will fall disproportionately on Europe. This has created an uneasy paradox. European leaders are now faced with the possibility of having to increase military aid to Ukraine while simultaneously preparing for a scenario in which Trump might pressure Kyiv into accepting a deal that favours Moscow. Germany, France and the UK have already signalled their commitment to supporting Ukraine, but their ability to fill the void left by potential US disengagement is questionable at best, and Putin knows it. For all the Western anxieties, therefore, it would be premature to suggest that Putin is winning. While Russia has made some battlefield gains, it's done so at extraordinary cost. The Russian economy remains battered by sanctions, its military has suffered massive casualties, and public support for the war, though carefully managed, has reached its limit. Meanwhile, Ukraine is not on the verge of capitulation. Quite the opposite. Despite Trump's cavalier statements, Kyiv is actively engaging with its allies, with serious members of its team with serious members of Trump's team set to visit Ukraine this week. And President Zelensky is also preparing to manage to get to meetings at the Munich Security Conference, possibly to go to Washington, signalling that Ukraine is not waiting passively for events to unfold. It's actively engaging with the flip-flop of events as they occur. If anything, Kyiv is preparing for a period of uncertainty, ensuring that it remains central to any discussions about its future. As the Trump timetable moves on, we're witnessing a moment of deep uncertainty for all parties involved. For Trump, it's about setting forward an agenda which will work. For Putin, it's about promise and peril, a chance to see Western unity fracture, but also the risk of dealing with an erratic and self-interested US president. For Ukraine, the challenge is to navigate this uncertainty, securing guarantees from Europe while managing its own strategic interests. For the West as a whole, the next few months will test the resilience of our commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty. Ultimately, the war is not over, nor is peace imminent. The battlefield will continue to shape the negotiations, but the shifting sands of US politics mean that nothing is settled. One thing, however, is certain. Vladimir Putin is watching the clock, and for the first time in a long time, he may not be entirely sure what happens next. If somebody were to pull the plug on the Smeg fridge, that's Putin done, isn't it?